Danielle LeBlanc, and this is the Banking and Finance panel. I work at Green Worker Cooperatives. We're located in the South Bronx, and we help to create worker-owned cooperatives, especially in the immigrant and communities of color. And we're interested in this field because we think the cooperative ownership model is a model that works in allowing people to create small businesses when they don't have broad access to capital. They can pool resources together. And we also have a co-op right now in our co-op academy that is in the cannabis sector. And the way the panel will be structured is that the panelists will give introductions, and then I'll ask them questions for about 40 minutes. I'll open it up for the panelists to ask questions of each other, and then there'll be Q&A from the audience the last 15 minutes. So we'll start, and with Bob here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for coming to the session. I work in the financial services space. I worked at the Federal Reserve for 15 years looking at payments issues and banking issues. And then after that I worked for the largest banks in the country in an association looking at banking and issues. And more recently I've started my own firm to advise various types of firms in increasing accessibility to financial services. As part of that effort, I was contacted a couple years ago. I'm from California, and California legalized adult use not too long ago, but medical use it's been 20 years. And the issue was there weren't really any banking services or financial services to the industry. And that got me thinking, and there's been a lot of movement, or there's been a lot of action. Movement may not be the right term in California. And then I started looking at other states, and I got interested in New York because New York is on the verge of legalizing adult use, I think. I'm not a New Yorker, but it seems to be going that direction. So it's a great pleasure to be here to talk about the challenges and what can be done in this space, because certainly if it's a cash-dominated industry, we're going to have issues of public safety. We're not going to collect the right taxes and things like that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Paxia. I'm co-founder and managing director of Poseidon. We have two investment funds that invest entirely into the cannabis industry. We launched our first fund in January of 2014, right alongside the opening of the adult use market in Colorado. So we've been investing over these last 5 years entirely in the space. My journey to get into the cannabis industry, though, actually started in my hometown of Youngstown, New York, which is just about 30 minutes north of Buffalo, which some people might be like, isn't that Canada? And the answer to that is yes, basically it is. But I lost both my parents to cancer, and it was back in 1996 in Buffalo, New York, that a hospice nurse first mentioned, when you're taking all those medications, they make you sicker and sicker. And she was like, she was the best. Hospice nurses are the best because they're always on the front line of these things. And she said, John, to my dad, why don't you just try smoking some pot? And I was like, what is she talking about? That is illegal. And that did not happen, obviously, but, or maybe he did, but we didn't know about it. But anyway, I feel like that opened my aperture and gave me a lens to see cannabis through a supportive and medicinal viewpoint, which then became a passion point for my brother and I when we put this fund together. I'm so thrilled to see New York State taking this so seriously and the DPA supporting what is happening here and thinking about how we can look at what has happened in other states. I'm currently based in California. We've seen how these other states have rolled out their regulations, and the implementation is a tricky process, and the banking is one of the biggest pain points that continues to exist in the industry. So just really happy to share what we've learned from other states here today. Very passionate about what's happening in New York, and thank you. Look forward to sharing more.
Hi, my name is Henry Meyer. I'm the General Counsel of the New York Credit Union Association, and I'm extremely happy to be here. My journey and the association's journey to getting involved with this is that we've heard so much in recent years, both within New York State and nationally, about legalization. And then you look, when you look into the legal complexities of what's involved, credit unions that were interested in helping out realized that, one, we had to work on the state level, but two, we also had to be cognizant of, no matter what's done on the state level, we have this roadblock called the federal government. So the charge me and my legislative person were given by the association is not to necessarily be for or against marijuana legalization, as opposed to clarification of the state and federal roles, so that in states such as New York, where marijuana is legal, it's in everyone's interest to have a system where banks and credit unions can legally and without fear take care of that money. It's in no one's interest to have a system where you have to bus truckloads of cash into New Jersey or to find a bank where they might be willing to accept it. So the association's goal is to get clarification of the issue and to help institutions ultimately find an efficient and safe way of providing what ultimately is a legal product in New York State. And in that regard, we have worked with the Department of Health as well as the Department of Financial Services to advocate, for example, for guidance when New York came out and urged credit unions to take a look at providing banking services. It is a key component of this whole issue, and it's one that I'm happy that I was invited to, just because, one, the issues need to be discussed, and two, every time I go to one of these, I end up learning a lot more than I knew before, so thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and I echo everyone's comment and thank you all for this opportunity. Before I speak about who I am and why I'm here, I'm just interested, how many in the audience are from financial institutions? And how many are operators in the business, cannabis business? So for those of you that are in the business, you certainly understand what those challenges are from a banking perspective. I'm Tina Sprager. I'm the president and CEO of GFA Federal Credit Union, a community credit union based in central Massachusetts. And we serve Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And I'm also the president of Safe Harbor of Massachusetts and New Hampshire, which is the financial institution that is serving the cannabis business in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire. In terms of what you said about clarifying the role of financial institutions, we've been very transparent. We've been doing our research about serving the industry for about 18 months, and very, very transparent. We'll talk about that later during the Q&A. But when we did go public and make the announcement that we were going to serve the industry, I had a lot of colleagues in the banking space send me emails or call me, and the responses were either, have you lost your mind? Or, congratulations, I wish I had the courage to undertake what you are going through and the stance that you're taking. Wouldn't be able to do it without the support of our board of directors, who I would say have been very pioneers in offering this opportunity to enter what is a very challenging journey, because we have the dichotomy between federal laws and state laws that certainly give us pause in terms of how we're going to manage and provide mainstream banking services to a legitimate industry. So at the credit union, we always talk about, when we're making decisions to do things, we ask ourselves why, and also, is it consistent with our mission? And the why for us was about public safety. In Massachusetts, they're estimating that the cash, the receipts, is going to be anywhere in the first year alone from about 260 to over $400 million. If that industry is not banked, that is a lot of cash walking the streets. And for us, if part of our mission is about improving the quality of life for our communities that we serve, then certainly we're not improving the quality of life if we're letting that kind of cash walk around in backpacks and being buried and stored under mattresses and vaulting services and whatnot. So for us, the why was extremely important. And again, that why is about public safety. And was it consistent with our mission? Absolutely. Credit unions were formed to serve the underserved, just as the credit union did 80 years ago. Today we are serving the underserved as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to speaking with you all.
Good morning. My name is Barb Van Kerkhove, and I am a researcher policy analyst in the Rochester office of Empire Justice Center. We're a statewide civil legal services firm. We have 5 offices across the state. And our mission is to make the law work for all New Yorkers, especially those most in need of its protection. So my focus today then will be on how we can make the legalization of cannabis serve best the people that have been most harmed by the harsh drug laws and mass incarceration. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, along with some of the work that I do at Empire Justice to make sure that financial institutions serve the communities, particularly low and moderate income communities and communities of color. And so how our spotlight on banks with respect to that can move over to using for businesses that are moving into the cannabis space, how we can maybe hold banks' feet to the fire and make sure that they serve it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start off asking Henry, if you could just give us an overview of the legal system that New York financial institutions and cannabis businesses will be operating under if it's legalized.
Well, New York, there's 2 basic models that you see developing when it comes to legalization nationwide. One is what I'm going to call a consumer model, typified, I guess, best by Colorado, where the emphasis is on allowing people and consumers to access marijuana for their own recreational use. New York was extremely hesitant to take that approach. So when New York chose to legalize marijuana, it employed what I'm going to call a medical model to legalization. So the first structure you see put in place for marijuana is a system of framework whereby there is a list of maladies for which individuals can receive a prescription for marijuana use. The doctors providing that service have to be certified and they are regulated. And as a result, you have a system, so that's the basic framework. We're going to set up a system in New York where people who with medical needs that would benefit from marijuana can get access to it, okay? But then the question became, well, how are we going to provide these services? The way New York provides these services, it sets up a framework of growers and then people and then distributors, okay? As of yesterday, I believe there were 10 separate companies within New York that produced marijuana. Each one of those is allowed up to 4 dispensaries. So at this point, you have basically 40 areas throughout the state where when someone does get that prescription, they can get access to the marijuana. So that is the basic framework we have on the state level at this point. Now, all this is done, notwithstanding the fact that as a matter of federal law, marijuana remains unequivocally illegal to possess and distribute. And as a result, what you have is a banking system is, okay, for those credit unions and banks that may want to service these companies, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. New York State has taken the position, as a matter of state law, that those of you who follow the FinCEN, a memo put out by an organization called FinCEN, which describes the steps that financial institutions have to take to monitor and ensure that this is a legitimate business that they are providing services for. Those are the conditions under which the Treasury Department is encouraging institutions to provide funding for marijuana businesses. Now the plot thickens because you may have heard there was an election a couple of years ago, and the new Attorney General decided that it was going to change an Obama-era policy and tell individual U.S. attorneys that they could, in fact, choose to prosecute people who participate in drug activities which were perfectly illegal as a matter of state law. So you now have this dichotomy where New York State has a framework for legalizing and distributing marijuana, where the Treasury Department still has a memo detailing the steps it wants to take. It wants financial institutions serving those institutions to take, but you have the Attorney General saying that, hey, we could always prosecute you. Now, it's not as big. Now, I'm usually described as the fire hydrant in the door kind about these things, because I tend to be a little negative, but I really do believe that this is an area that we are seeing some movement, that I think a lot of this confusion is going to be resolved. But as we stand right now, that's the basic framework that institutions looking into banking find themselves. It's a tough call.
And Bob, can you talk a little bit about the payment systems banks face, and why this matters to banks? What are some of the repercussions if they are found providing financial services to cannabis businesses?
Sure. Let me start by saying, just like there was a war on drugs that everybody in this room is familiar with, there are central banks and others around the world that proclaimed a war on cash. So there was a movement to get rid of cash for precisely the reason that cash is associated with criminal activity. So it is somewhat ironic that we are sitting here in states in which cannabis has been legal and cash is still the main instrument. The payment system is an interesting system. It has evolved over many years. Generally, it's a system of banks that participate in networks. Some networks you're familiar with, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and the like.